Officer Don with Fayette Commonwealth's Attorney Ray Larson. We're going to talk about criminal justice news and views from the inside. That's the cool part about this show, is we're just telling you how it is from our perspective.
Well, from our perspective.
But it's the right perspective.
You mean right or left? It's the right perspective.
Hey, you know what? Wherever it is, it is.
Yeah.
I don't care where it falls.
Yeah.
We've got some homicide numbers for Lexington homicides. Are these from 2011?
2011. There were 15 homicides in Lexington, and over the years, the Lexington homicide unit of the police department's homicide unit has been just over the top on solving these homicides. For the past several years, they call it the clearance rate. The clearance rate has been in the 90 to 93% category. This year, they have cleared 11, which is 73%, but you know they'll end up clearing a few more of the 4 that are still open. So that's that's a good thing, and I always try to find out a little bit of the information about the homicides in Lexington. For example, of the homicides in Lexington in 2011, 87% or 13 were as a result of gunshot wounds, and the other 2 were as a result of blunt force trauma. Now people say, what does that mean? Well, they just have been beat to death is what that is, and sometimes you have it done with a club, with a hammer, with any of those kinds of things. The blunt force trauma also involved being killed in a car crash, because you get killed by blunt force trauma in those things. The gender of the defendants. See, we got 4 of them we don't know because they haven't been solved. But typically, the defendants' gender, 12 of the cases, or 80%, have been men, and 3 women. Now, women are getting more and more involved in this whole criminal justice violence business. The defendant's race, 40% are white, 40% are black, and of course we have 3 that we don't know. That's 20%. So what about the victims? 80% of the victims are males, and 20% are women, just like the defendants for some reason. And then what about the victim's race? 47% of the victims are black, 46% of the victims are white, and 7% is something else, either Hispanic or Indonesian or Asian or something else. So that's sort of the snapshot of homicides in Lexington in 2011.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. First, what percentage did you say were related to handguns? Early in the conversation here.
That was
83%, something like that?
80, I think it was 87.
Okay, so let's say almost 90% are involving handguns. Do you think, is that because Lexington, and not Lexington, but Kentucky in particular, has very, I guess some people would call lax gun laws? In other words, in Kentucky, anyone can pack a gun if you don't have a criminal record. You can strap one on your side and pack it. You have the availability to get a permit in Kentucky, which you don't have in a lot of states. And I'll give you an example. As a retired police officer, we get a federal permit that allows us to carry in every state, even states that don't issue permits. I was in D.C. a few weeks ago, got there really late, like 2 in the morning, and as I was tipping the bellhop, he could see my gun, which I normally would try to keep concealed, but I was tired, and it slipped out of my pants, and you could see the butt of it. Well, this dude calls the police, because apparently in D.C. they have a rule or a law that if you observe someone with a weapon and you're in the hotel industry, like if you find one in a room or you have to call the police, so the police come out knock on the door, and I showed them my permit, and they said, oh, no problem. We just have pretty tough gun laws here in D.C. I thought it was ironic that they have very tough gun laws in D.C., but they have probably the highest murder rate in the country.
Typically, this past year it hadn't been, but typically they have one of the highest homicide rates in America.
And still most of their homicides involve guns too. So if most of the homicides in Kentucky involve guns, most of the homicides in D.C. involve guns, do you think there's a correlation between a state that doesn't regulate people who can carry guns and the homicide rate? Do you see that?
Well, in D.C., the only people that are allowed to have guns, or the only ones that seem to have guns, are the bad guys. So the law applies. You know, here's the deal. Most people want to obey the law. And if it's against the law to own a gun, most people are going to say that's the law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the outlaws, the hoodlums, the thugs of the world, they don't care. They got a gun because they use them.
And they understand in D.C. that the average citizen's less likely to have one, so that may be part of their tactical thinking when they're about to deal with people.
Well, one of the things I've been very concerned about is our willingness of our legislature to just basically let people out of prison. There's a reason people are in prison. That's because they commit crimes. Now, if they're going to let all these thugs out that commit crimes, don't ever take citizens' ability to own guns and defend themselves away. It's just, that's where it is.
There's something else.
Now here's the deal. On an airline, if they handed everybody a 32 caliber revolver that got on the airplane, you think there'd be any hijacked airplanes? No.
Well, I wouldn't be on the airplane either, though.
Yeah.
That would have gone too far. Anyway, in fact, I heard a point made when people were giving a hard time to the TSA rules. They were saying that these rules they're too strict and whatever. And I heard one guy say, "Well, I tell you what. Here's what we need to do. We need to have two systems. Okay, we're going to put two planes on a tarmac, and one of the airplanes, everybody that gets on that plane has to go through security. They have to be checked out." They have to go through these body scanners where they might look naked on an x-ray for a couple of seconds, and their baggage has to be checked, and they'll be put on plane A. Now, anyone who doesn't want to go through that can get on plane B, which no one will be checked. You choose which plane you want to fly on. And I think most people would probably pick plane A.
Right.
Run me through the scanner.
That's right.
I mean, that's what it boils down to.
Right.
Here's something else I want to ask, something that I heard this week that was interesting, since we're talking about homicides, something they're doing in New Orleans. Talking about homicide rate, I believe now they probably are at the top. They had like 400 homicides last year in the city of New Orleans.
They had 48 shootings one weekend in New Orleans.
It is just crazy.
And I pay attention to that because that's where my daughter-in-law is from, and that's where her family lives.
So, well, here's the deal. The New Orleans Police Department has recently began releasing not just the criminal histories of the people who do the shooting. They now release the criminal histories of the victims, which is ticking a lot of people off because they're saying, why are you doing this? Why are you releasing the criminal histories of the victims? What say you to that? Why do you think the New Orleans Police Department has decided to start doing that?
Well, you told me why, because we talked a little bit about this before. New Orleans lives and dies with their tourist industry. And if it appears that the tourists are being picked off and killed, then there goes the tourist industry. But what happens typically, in Lexington, no different, other than the fact that the number of homicides are much fewer. But dope dealers end up killing dope dealers in Lexington, or people get in fights and that kind of stuff, and next thing you know, they're firing guns at each other and that sort of thing.
So oftentimes the victims, and we have to be clear on this, it's not true with every homicide.
That's exactly.
Tune in to the following stations every Sunday to hear full episodes of In Touch with Ray the DA and Don Evans.